Hi, this is Albert from AWB Electrical and Marine Services. Just doing a quick rundown on spark plugs and hopefully understanding a bit more about diagnosing them and understanding how they operate within the combustion chamber, and when you pull them out, understanding what's going on there a bit better. Because it actually came up when we pulled the plugs on this engine. And I explained, actually my son was with me, school holidays, and he said, "Oh, how can you know all that stuff from a spark plug?" And that's just stuff that's just been known for years in the industry. So these are actually NGK TR6s, TR6 plugs. So these are actually out of a Volvo Penta 5.7 GXI. So straight up, these aren't the right plug. These are the wrong plug. The actual correct plug in NGK is a TR55. Or there's I think there's an XI, which is I think that's an Iridium version. So these are just a standard copper. The difference between this and a 5.5 is the 5.5 is longer here, slightly in the thread, and it's extended a little bit more. So what that means is because this is a shorter projection and it's got shorter engagement here, so this whole area here is further out of the combustion chamber. It actually acts like the ignition timing is retarded. And it also, this plug 2 being a 6 as opposed to the correct heat range plug being a 5, this plug runs really cold in comparison. How so? If you look here, that's black. It's not black because it's burnt, that's black because it's carbon fouled, and probably even a slight bit of oil there because the plug isn't getting hot enough, So the plug isn't getting hot enough to self-clean. So heat range is very, very, very important here. It's hard to read this plug properly because it's not in the right heat range. But it was bearing its soul and giving us symptoms. So when the engine was starting cold, it was an absolute bugbear to start this thing, and it wouldn't like to idle cold. When we put the correct plugs in, as soon as we fired it up, it almost started on first crank. Like it went boom and then just idled. It was a little bit rocky, but part of that will be due to the fact that this here will be an indicator of what the combustion chambers are like. We take the engine for the boat for a good hard run, and this will clean up, and she'll probably idle fine on the next cold startup. So the main thing with these plugs is, if these was the correct heat range, well, not necessarily correct heat range, if they're the correct thread engagement, you could then read it. But very important here, if you look at that, all through there, you can't see any burnt threads. So if the thread engagement is correct, you'll see, and the heat range is correct, you'll get about 2 to 3 full turns of thread here, which will show like a brown burn on them. And that basically tells you your heat range. If you've got nothing, like this one here, there's actually nothing here, that's too cold, as well as being short. But if it's too hot, you'll get more thread burnt with that brown burnt look on the threads. Some of the stuff that I'm talking about here will only apply to NGKs because this metal coating on it, it shows that up on the plugs. Even with pumped fuel gases, you'll always get that burning of the threads there. And if you don't have the right heat range plugs, you'll have cold misfires, it'll have stutters of going from part throttle to full throttle. It'll be fine on cruise, warm idle, but generally it'll feel a bit doughy and down on power. It wouldn't come up on the plane. So if you went to accelerate in a road engine, if you were accelerating, it would stutter as it's going through the rev range, and you'd be thinking it's fuel. It's not. It's because the plugs are wrong heat range, and they can't get hot enough, and they get fouled up. One surefire thing is you put the wrong plugs in, the cold plugs in. Generally they'll run right for the first 20-30 minutes, and then they'll basically just won't do it. But it won't be a very long period of time they'll run. The other thing with plugs is it is hard to see plugs up in the end here because that's all fouled. But when you're looking at these, if the heat range is right, you can then move on to the next thing, which is ignition timing and fuel. But the main thing with ignition timing is here. is this ground strap here. You should see a discoloring effect on this ground strap right at this knee here if the ignition timing is good under power. So that's your power ignition timing. And then if you look closely on one that's not fouled, you'll see a second haze on the ground strap a little bit further back, and that'll be your part throttle idle ignition timing. The main thing is if this ignition timing goes further down to here, that means this thing's turning into a glow rod, and it'll cause pre-ignition, and you'll also see peppering inside here on the porcelain. If you can read the porcelain, it'll show flex. If it's got no timing or little timing, it'll be basically up to the tip here. But generally, the timing should be on the knee here. Most engines are full power. Like a lot of these iron-headed engines and that, a good ballpark is somewhere between 30 and 36 degrees timing in that. But the plugs will tell you where you need to be. There's a few quirks which will be less than that, hotted up engines and so forth. Another thing with spark plugs, I've always found that unless it's a really heavily modified engine, you never go colder in plugs. Never, ever, ever, ever. You're like when I say modified, extractors, exhaust, and a carburetor doesn't cut it. I mean, like recurve distributors or faster ignition timing curves coupled with a lot more compression, like at least a half to a full point more compression, increased camshaft, all those other mods to suit, yeah, you'd probably start looking at your heat range of your plugs, definitely. Other than that, you wouldn't bother. But yeah, like with that there, that'll tell you where you need to be. And then in here, you generally look at your fueling. That as a general rule is very, very hard to do on a pump gas engine because all the additives, you get all this mess through here. But generally you'll be looking at the top edge here and here. On a road car, you would have to be looking at within the first 1,000 kilometers. And the more black this gets, the richer the car is, the richer the engine is. So basically, as you look down inside here, right inside the core there, there'll be a ring there, like a dark ring. The fatter the engine is running, the higher the ring comes up, and the more it'll get sooty up here. The leaner the engine runs, the more it goes down here. So if this is white, and you've done 1,000 Ks, like white, you know, white as white can be, you'll generally look there and you'll probably see specks on it, and you've probably got detonation because it's way too lean. Because on a pump engine, you'll always get a bit of this carbon build up here. So yeah, so hopefully that gives people a bit of an idea of spark plugs. So when you pull them out, it's always a good idea to have a look at what they're doing, and they're a good insight into what's happening inside your combustion chamber. So with this engine here, putting the right plugs has helped it out. It was mainly a twofold issue with heat range and the projection was incorrect. And because this has been running like this for a long time, there'll be a lot of carbon and crap in the combustion chamber. So we'll have to try and give this a good hard Italian tune-up, I guess you could say, to try and clean it out. And then once that's done there, she should be able to idle again, and then we can check the ignition timing on the engine again and make sure it's where it needs to be. But yeah, this is, yeah, like a lot of people don't realize this, and hopefully this is helpful to someone out there, because it's not rocket science, it's not voodoo, it's not magic, it's just the information's there, and if you know what you're looking at, you can save a lot of damage to an engine if you start keeping an eye on this stuff. So if there's any questions, pop them down below.